Sometimes you just nail it first try. I mean, that's never happened to me, but apparently it happens. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I'm taking you through some of my absolute favourite debut books. These are the first book that the author has ever written and the ones that completely spellbound me, captured me into their world and have made me a firm and lifelong fan. I have also followed on their careers, of course, but something just does strike me about the first time that we fell in love. I could not talk about a debut video and not mention I Heart New York by Lindsay Kelk. Take a drink. This follows Angela, who catches her boyfriend having sex with another woman in the backseat of a car while they are at their best friend's wedding. She then decides to head for wherever the first place that she can find a ticket for is and completely restarts her life in New York. She makes a whole new set of friends, she makes a whole new career for herself, and she falls in love again while she's there. There are some parts of this book that haven't really held the test of time, I will say that as a kind of critical review, but overall, this was a phenomenal introduction to Angela Clark and to Lindsay Kelk's writing as a whole. To bring it a little bit closer to home, another debut that I absolutely adored was Oh My God, What a Complete Aisling by Sarah Breen and Emer McLysaght. Aisling has been in the kind of pop culture of Ireland for, I would say, the best part of the last decade. Aisling is a character that was created by the two women as they were students in a college in Dublin, and she's kind of your stereotypical country girl who moves to Dublin for work or to study and always goes home at the weekend, always has her lunch with her in a Brown Thomas bag, changes from her runners into more sensible shoes when she gets to the office. There are parts of Aisling in me, and then there are also parts that I kind of do raise an eyebrow at and say, is this actually realistic? But Aisling and I have been very firm friends since we first met, and the first book that the two wrote is an absolute triumph. It isn't just your straightforward chick lit. They did put a whole lot of very difficult topics to cover into this book and the subsequent books that have followed, and I really admire and respect them for doing that, especially because some of the topics that are broached are quite personal to the two, and they have done it with such respect and such love that you just cannot help falling in love with these books. Going to YA for the next one, and that is the exact opposite of Okay by Laura Stevens. I read this when it came out about 3 or 4 years ago, I would say, and I completely fell in love with Izzy O'Neill. She is about 16 or 17 and she is in her later years of high school and has two friends that have kind of stuck by her through thick and thin. But throughout the book, there are pictures of Izzy released and she is the victim of a slut-shaming campaign throughout her school. It also brings to light quite a lot of the prejudices and the realities of some of her friendship group. And I really loved how Laura tackled these. I really love how she wrote it and how Izzy kept her humour, not just as a coping mechanism, but because it was an integral part of who she was the entire way throughout the book. Izzy has dreams of becoming a stand-up comedian and she really does not let anything phase her plans there. And I loved seeing that. I loved seeing her drive, her determination, and also watching her skills develop. There is a second book to this, A Girl Called Shameless, and I did read it, but I don't think it was up there with the heights of the exact opposite of Okay for me. But I would definitely recommend that you go and check them out. Another YA book with somewhat similar feminist themes to the exact opposite of Okay that I absolutely adored as a debut novel was Only Ever Yours by Louise O'Neill. This has been heralded as kind of like The Handmaid's Tale for a modern audience, and I can definitely see the parallels, but also it does stray away from that a little bit. You have got two girls, Isabel and Frida, who are not born. Women are not born into the world at the moment. They are created or manufactured and then sent off to kind of like a preparatory school to make themselves be the perfect wife for their future husbands. There's 3 categories that girls can fit into. They can either be wives, concubines, or teachers. The girls are in their final year at this school, so they are preparing for the world that's outside, getting ready for it, and they have to be perfect. Visibly perfect, intellectually perfect, personalities have to be perfect. There is no room for error in this life. The problem is that Isabel is starting to gain weight, which is making Frida concerned that life is not going to be so easy for her best friend. This is a harrowing story, and it's one that you really need to be ready for, but it is such a phenomenal commentary on how much importance we place on our looks at the moment, especially when you are in your teenage years yourselves. It's such a phenomenal read, and it makes quite the impact. Next one up is very special to me, not just because it is a debut, but for a specific reason. It was my debut. My Map of You by Isabel Broom is the first arc I was ever sent as a book blogger, and that's not the only reason that it appears on this list. Holly's aunt has passed away, and she is being sent to her aunt's summer house in Zakynthos in Greece to kind of cover everything up and take care of the house and have it ready for the next people who are going to move in. While she's there, Holly meets with an Irish guy called Aidan. They start falling for each other, and she really starts to distance herself from her asshole boyfriend who's left behind in London. There's a whole lot of subterfuge and discoveries that come throughout this book, and I can honestly say, if you read this, you will feel like you are on a beach in Zakynthos. Next up is Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I got a copy of this recently. The first time that I actually read this book, it was owned by a friend of mine who borrowed it to me. And I loved it so much that I instantly went to look for the other 3 books on my Kindle, but also decided that I wanted a physical copy for myself. Rachel Chu is an economics professor in New York and has been dating Nick Young for about 3 or so years by now. He's finally popped the question, and now he is taking her to Singapore to meet his family and to see the places where he grew up. What Rachel didn't know is that Nick is a member of one of Singapore's most wealthy and most well-known families, and she is about to be thrown headfirst, no preparations, into his world. There's a whole lot to discuss in this book. The idea of familial respect, the idea of Western versus Eastern cultures. There's a whole lot of Singaporean culture that is brought in this book. There are also a lot of Singlish, which is like Singaporean dialect of English, that is used in this book, and there are some really helpful footnotes that will help you to explain the cultural differences, what they are eating, why they are doing this thing, where they are going, what the importance of this is, and I absolutely loved that part of it. I really loved learning about Singaporean culture. I've been to Singapore before for like a stopover, and I would love to go back there someday. Reading this book is kind of like a cheaper way to get back there. Next up is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. I utterly loved this book. It had something in it that I hadn't ever seen before having read this book. A woman who works in STEM. This is Stella, who works in STEM and is on the autism spectrum and has never had a date before in her life. She's not even sure that she'd be any good at it, so she decides to hire an escort who's going to teach her how to date, how to be good in the bedroom, how to be a good girlfriend, all that kind of thing. The man that she hires is Michael, and throughout the course of the book, you see them really kind of blur the lines between a professional and an actual personal relationship, and I absolutely loved seeing it. There's also quite a lot of instances of Vietnamese culture and Vietnamese American culture, something that, again, I hadn't seen a lot of in books before, but really loved exploring this world. There are 2 other books that follow. I've read one of them, The Bright Test, and I've got The Heart Principle on my TBR waiting for me, and I am so excited to rediscover this world. The next debut that I loved is one from way back in the 1990s, and that is Watermelon by Marion Keyes. It's not only her debut book, but it is also the first book in the Walsh Sisters series, which follows the 5 Walsh sisters and the ups and downs of their lives. Claire is the eldest Walsh sister. She is living in London, and she and her husband are expecting their first child. On the day that their daughter is born, Claire's husband leaves. He packs her troubles up and goes right back to Dublin, falls back into the family home, gets back in with her family, and starts falling in love with one of her sister's friends. I really loved this portrayal of single motherhood, unexpected single motherhood, divorce, and watching somebody try and pick their life back up. It is a little bit outdated at times. There are some points of the book that you do have to raise an eye at and remember that this was written in a very different time, in a very different Ireland to the one that I'm familiar with at the moment. But I also love seeing how Marion's writing has improved and how it has flowed ever since reading Watermelon. Next up is The Princess Diaries by Meg Cabot, and this follows Mia, who is a 14-year-old living in New York. Her parents are separated, and her dad comes back into the picture to tell her that she is the heir to a small principality in southern Europe. Of course, this completely turns Mia's world on its head, and she not only has to grapple with how she sees herself as being vastly unpopular, a little bit slow at maths, and not loved by any guy that she's ever been into, but now she also has to put being a princess on top of that. Mia and I have been firm friends since we met. I absolutely adore these books. They are among the things that I go back to for comfort time and time and time again. And it's one of my favorite books that I read as a teenager. Last on the list is probably the most recent debut that I have read, and that is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I read this as a buddy read with two friends of mine, and all three of us loved this. This is a TikTok darling, so I would be quite surprised if you've not heard of it, but it follows Olive, who is a PhD student at Stanford University. She's trying to convince her friend that going out with this guy that Olive has been with before is completely fine. There's no bad blood, there's no hard feelings, just go for it. So to try and get her friend to really see this, Olive kisses the first guy that passes her. This guy turns out to be Adam, who has a reputation upon the university as being quite cantankerous, quite cold, very difficult to approach. The two of them start a fake dating relationship together to try and get things to work out a bit better for them, and of course, real feelings start to come through. I loved again that this was a woman working in STEM, that it was an academics book. It is a Reylo fanfic, but I've not actually seen a whole lot of Star Wars, so even I could enjoy it, having no experience of the other side of that world. There you have it. Those are some of the debut novels that I have absolutely loved and read time and time again. What are some of your favourite debut novels? Please leave them in the comments below for us. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.